The year is 1971. The United States of America is about to make the greatest economic move in world history. Overnight, the global monetary system tied to gold is buried in history, and in its place comes oil. But this is not merely an economic decision. This is a deal in which power, fear, weapons, and politics are deeply intertwined, and one that forms the very foundation of the global order we still live in today, the Petrodollar System. This system contains everything: wars, dictators, political assassinations, global crises. Are you ready? Then let's begin. While the smoke of World War II was still rising, in 1944, world leaders gathered in a small hotel room in New Hampshire. Their sole purpose was to rebuild the global economy devastated by the war, and they produced a new economic system, one that would go down in history as Bretton Woods. Under this system, every country in the world would peg its currency to the American dollar. The dollar, in turn, would be fixed at a price equivalent to 1 ounce of gold. This system worked. But why? Because the United States held 75% of the world's gold. But over time, things began to break down. The astronomical costs of the Vietnam War, the public spending of the Johnson and Nixon administrations, and inflation. Countries started taking their dollars to the US and demanding, convert this into gold. And America's gold reserves began to melt away rapidly. France, in particular, was especially insistent on this. They loaded millions of dollars onto ships, sent them to the US, and took back tons of gold in return. In 1971, faced with these mounting demands, Nixon made his historic announcement: the dollar can no longer be converted into gold. This was the moment the world's currency lost its golden anchor. It went down in history as the Nixon shock. So what was the dollar backed by now? This is where Saudi Arabia steps onto the stage. In 1973, the OPEC nations launched an oil embargo in response to the US support of Israel. Gasoline prices quadrupled. Lines stretched out at gas stations. America was paralyzed. But this crisis was also an opportunity. Secretary of State Henry Kissinger, one of the sharpest and most ruthless strategic minds in the world, sprang into action. In 1974, Kissinger traveled to Saudi Arabia for a secret agreement. The terms were as follows: Saudi Arabia would sell its oil only in American dollars, and in return, the US would provide military protection to the Saudi regime. The dollars earned by the Saudis would be invested in US Treasury bonds, meaning the Saudis would finance America's debt with the money they earned. And finally, the US would arm Saudi Arabia and keep it powerful in the region. This agreement was signed. Shortly after, other OPEC nations also joined the same system. And so, the petrodollar system was fully established. The dollar was no longer backed by gold. It was backed by oil itself. If you wanted to buy oil anywhere in the world, you first needed to obtain dollars. And to obtain dollars, you needed to invest in American assets. This cycle turned the United States into the world's central bank. Now, let's understand the system in simple terms. Let's say Germany wants to buy oil. Oil is sold in dollars on the international market. So Germany first buys dollars with euros. Then it purchases Saudi oil with those dollars. What do the Saudis do with the dollars they receive? They invest them in American Treasury bonds. In other words, they finance the US debt. That money circulates back and feeds the American economy. So, what does this mean for the US? An enormous privilege. Economists call it the exorbitant privilege. The US is the only country that can print dollars. And since the dollar is the world's reserve currency for trade, everyone accepts it. This means the US can, in a sense, obtain resources without even selling goods and services to the world, simply by printing money. This is a power that empires could only dream of. But this power comes at a cost. Because everyone in the world needs dollars, the US is forced to run a constant trade deficit. If dollars don't flow out, the world can't find them, and trade grinds to a halt. So the reality is this: for the US to appear powerful, it must borrow. And this fragile balance has been shaken many times throughout history. Understanding the petrodollar system means understanding all the wars and geopolitical balances of the last 50 years. Because every leader who dared to challenge this system paid an extremely heavy price. Saddam Hussein. In 2000, Iraq began selling its oil in euros instead of dollars. This was an international challenge. The system cracked. In 2003, the US invaded Iraq under the pretext of weapons of mass destruction. No weapons were found, but Iraq's oil trade returned to the dollar. Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi, on the other hand, was dreaming of something far greater: the gold dinar. A plan for African and Arab nations to sell oil using a shared currency backed by gold. This would have been a direct attack on the dollar. In 2011, NATO intervened in Libya. Gaddafi was captured and killed. The gold dinar project was consigned to history. Do you think all of this is a coincidence? For years, Iran has been trying to sell its oil in currencies other than the dollar, and for this reason has faced many severe sanctions. These examples show us the following. The petrodollar system is not merely an economic order. It is also a geopolitical instrument of power. Challenging this system is a move with serious consequences for anyone who dares to try. So, what is happening today? In recent years, the petrodollar system has been facing serious pressure. China and Russia are using the yuan and ruble in their bilateral trade without needing the dollar. Saudi Arabia is negotiating with China to sell its oil in yuan. This is a major breaking point. The BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and new members, are in search of an alternative reserve currency to the dollar. After Russia's invasion of Ukraine, being cut off from SWIFT by the West and having its dollar reserves frozen sent a striking message to the world. The dollar can be used as a weapon. And the countries that received this message began to ask, what if the same happens to us? Trust in the dollar is being shaken. But the petrodollar system is still standing. It is still one of the world's most powerful financial mechanisms. And the system that will replace it is not yet clear. All of these historical and geopolitical events and political pressures may seem distant to you, but they are not. Have you ever wondered why exchange rates matter so much? Because the price of energy is determined in dollars. When the dollar strengthens, the currencies of energy importing nations erode. Turkey, India, Egypt, Argentina, they all pay their energy bills in dollars. Why do gasoline prices fluctuate with global movements? Because oil is priced in dollars, and that price reflects everywhere in the world. Why do central banks still hold the vast majority of their reserves in dollars? Because dollars are needed for energy transactions. In other words, the petrodollar system is present in every aspect of your life, from the gas pump to the price tag at your local grocery store. And if this system changes, and there are signals that it might, the global economy will be reshaped. Who will win? Who will lose? We don't know yet. But we do know this. This system was not born by accident. It was built by someone's will, design, and power. And that power will continue to exist for as long as the dollar is printed. This is exactly what the petrodollar system is, a mechanism that shapes the world, causes wars, determines the fate of leaders, and affects the pockets of billions of people every single day. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to my channel. See you in the next video.